Hello and good day and welcome back to Maker's Bar. It's your boy Seth Garu Baxter with Maker's Bar, where we're creating 1 million leaders today for tomorrow. Today, it is my esteemed honor and pleasure to have a longtime brother, a longtime friend, one of the best looking guys you can know in the business, sharp, witty, warm, professional. We go back to the days where we were both club promoters, trying to do our shine and make people feel welcome and feel some love. He is both a director and a writer of both television and film. One of his projects has gone on to Cannes, the film festival. He's produced 5 features, 2 optional pilots, and he was featured in the Huffington Post. He currently is playing Father Carlos Martin, going into its 2nd season, where he is Father Carlos Martins. I actually said the name incorrectly. He is one of the most endearing personalities I know and have had the pleasure and warmth of being with. My good friend and good brother, director, writer, entrepreneur, leader, Paul Leach. Please make him feel welcome. Paul, thank you so much for joining me, my brother. How are you today?
What's up, Guru? Thanks for having me. Thank you for everyone at home who's tuning in for a few minutes to look at this handsome man and let me ride in his wake a little bit. Thanks, guys.
All right, thank you for that. Well, Paul, as I mentioned, we go back a ways, Cat.
Yeah, we do. It seems like so long ago. Time goes by so fast in LA. Anyone who doesn't live in Los Angeles or Southern California, you just do not realize how fast time goes by out here. It's like casino time, just like years ago.
That's a good way to put it. That's absolutely a good way to put it. So, Paul, you know what I like to do? Let's start with talking about your beginnings. Where do you hail from? And give us kind of a little bio of yourself on where you were born and your journey to where you're at now.
Yeah. So, so you guys aren't too bored at home. I'm from a little town in upstate New York, little cow town. I actually milk cows. 2 summers in high school is my summer job. And now, just fast forward through all the boring stuff. Live in LA, just like Guru. I work in the TV film industry. I'm a WGA writer. As Guru has said, 5 of my movies have been made. 1 is dropping this Friday, which is super exciting. Yes. One of my unscripted shows is on Amazon. It's called Proof. I was the story producer for that. I did a small stint on a soap opera called Days of Our Lives. And acting wise, I'm doing a voiceover, as Guru mentioned, as Father Carlos Martins in the #1 podcast in the religious section last year on Spotify called The Exorcist Files. If you haven't checked it out, it's about the real life exorcisms done by Father Carlos Martins for the Catholic Church. It's sort of an interview style. They talk about, he's interviewed, and then we reenact all those exorcisms. And I have the honor to play Father Martins, and all those reenactments. We're in season 2 right now. So please check it out. It's very interesting stuff if you like hearing about exorcisms.
If you don't mind, Paul, tell us a little bit about Father Carlos Martins and his story, so our folks can tune in or get a little insight.
So Father Martins he's very interesting. Like, I don't know how he started. Oh, I think he worked with an exorcist with the Catholic Church. Interesting. And he's sort of under that tutelage. He's a little bit skeptical from just as a person, which is actually really good. You actually want someone who is a little skeptical, or else maybe they're, making things up. And he's very fascinating. He actually, in his skepticism, people come and say, hey, I'm possessed, or I know someone who's possessed, and he doesn't believe it. Most of the time he doesn't want to believe it, right? And he's done dozens of exorcisms, so he'll do something like really silly, like someone will come to his office, they're like, yeah, I think I have a demon. He'll be like, oh yeah, sure. He's like, hey, I gotta get this book behind you, don't worry about it. He'll sneak behind them. He's got a little jar of holy water, and he'll actually just like spritz them in the back without them realizing it. And if they have some adverse reaction, he's like, okay, they're possessed. But if they don't react, he's like, oh yeah, they're just full of it. So he generally that most people aren't really possessed. So he really has to make sure, and so with the Catholic Church, there's like 3 signs of possession. It could be
Well,
one
just before we get there, real quick. So how does he know sometime if he sprinkles the water on them, they just didn't need a shower?
I mean, that's the demon of uncleanliness.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Okay.
That's a real demon. The demon of funk. It's a real demon.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So it's just really fascinating because he talked about these things called relics, because in the Catholic Church, they use these things. They really big on relics, which sounds crazy. Like, he actually is on a tour right now with a piece of the arm of St. Jude, like a piece of the bone, right? And they tour around with these stuff. And initially for me, it just sounds sort of weird, right? You're like, relics, whatever. But he actually said there's biblical credence for the power of relics. And he talked about how, like when the handkerchief touched Paul the Apostle and then touched this woman, she was healed. So that would be considered a relic, that piece of clothing which there's power in. And I just read something today in Kings, which is really crazy, where Elijah is taking Elisha with him just before he dies, and he rolls up his tarp and he hits the water, and the water disperses, hitting the tarp with the water with his tarp. So there seems like there's actually is some biblical credence for relics being effective, like power being in relics, if the power of God has been placed into some sort of physical object like that. We don't really talk about it in the Protestant church very much because it sounds sort of odd, but hearing him explain it and giving his biblical references, I'm like, oh yeah, maybe that's a thing, because he uses a lot of times relics in his exorcisms. He'll have a relic and he'll use it. It's very fascinating. One of the more controversial episodes that I think it's already dropped this season. It's season 2 isn't complete. I think it's still ongoing. There might be an episode 2 left. It's about yoga. And it's controversial because everyone's going to hate it, because they're not going to either be like, oh yeah, sure, whatever. But it's fascinating because apparently yoga poses are gotten from worship poses to Hindu deities. And I actually confirmed this with one of my pastors who is from India, and he was 100%. He goes like, yoga, all these poses are actually poses in worship for Hindu deities. And in this episode, this woman who's doing yoga, she gets possessed by a kundalini spirit, which is that snake at the base of her spine, and she starts hissing. And while the exorcism is going on, she actually starts going through yoga poses. And so the question that Father Martins gets asked is, like, well, why doesn't everyone get possessed when they do yoga then? Like, if it's so bad. And so the way Father Martin says, he goes, we do things in life. And he goes, it's like opening the back door, leaving the back door open. Sometimes something comes in, sometimes it doesn't. But when you're doing things and working with things, it's like leaving the back door open and maybe something can come in. It's fascinating. So I encourage anyone who's interested in exorcisms and the demonic and the supernatural world, because he said, I think I was going to tell you, there's 3 types of manifestations where he says somebody is actually possessed. One is they're talking in ancient tongues. Another one is they have superhuman strength. And the third one is they start levitating. And he's seen all of those things. And it's just like, what? You've seen people levitate, you've had supernatural strength. He's actually experienced this stuff in today's day and age. It's crazy because, we feel like that's, in the movies or something that happened, over in Europe somewhere in the early 1800s or something. But he's actually experienced all that stuff in a real way. And you wonder then in the Protestant church, like, well, shoot, how come, we didn't see much of that stuff. So it's very interesting. I recommend everyone check it out. True stories, very fascinating stuff, very deep, kind of interesting spiritual things. If you're interested in exorcisms and demons and that kind of thing.
Well, before I go into my next question, where is it showing right now? What streaming service?
So, guys, it is on a place where every podcast is. You can find it on any podcast site: Spotify, Apple, Google, iHeartRadio. It is literally every place podcasts are, and obviously it's for free because it's a podcast. So, and last year, season 1 was the #1 podcast in the spirituality section. It was number 1.
Congratulations, brother. Congratulations.
Well, it's a fascinating subject, man. I mean, it's something that people are like,
It is. I got to tell you a little known fact to my audience and to you. My parents both worked with exorcists with the Catholic Church,
heck
and
yes.
they were Protestant. They were Protestant. My parents were, and in fact, also small known fact, Father Malachi Martin, who was instrumental with The Exorcist, the story of The Exorcist.
Wow.
My dad had worked with, and it.
Wow.
I tell you, some of the things I've seen growing up, and maybe not for this particular podcast, but it is an extremely fascinating field, and I don't know in our current conversations and so forth. There are, there's definitely the naysayers and so forth, but
Yeah. Yeah.
the exorcisms themselves are. They are definitely a topic of conversation that people don't know necessarily how to deal with. So
Yeah.
I know myself, having had that experience growing up, that it is an interesting, and I've watched a number of them, the scary movies and so forth. I know a number of our viewers watch the horror movies without knowing that some of these priests and confirmed exorcists they are real life people who are experiencing nuanced and new things that people haven't seen before. So it must be extremely fascinating. What led you to this role?
Well, firstly, I was going to say, Guru, do you have any stories you want to tell the audience? And by the way, from the
Oh
audience,
boy.
I'm sorry if you guys are expecting a lot of TV, film, shop talk. That'll come. That'll happen in a second. But hopefully
Yes.
this isn't boring for you. So, Guru, do you have a story you want to tell?
I can tell you, I remember I was about 15, 16 years old. This one sticks in my head the first, that we were in a service. And wow, this is the first time I'm sharing this so publicly, but I have every bit of sincerity in giving it as truthfully as possible. But we were in the service, and there was a young man who began speaking in a whole other language. And with that, he started climbing up the wall. I saw him climb up the wall backwards. And yes, I kid you not. I remember the church was filled with people, and he was starting to speak this language, and he was hissing and these other things. And a woman jumped over a chair. Another woman passed out, and it was quite different and frightening. And as he was crawling up the wall, they were going on with the holy oil and a number of different things. And I remember thinking, we've seen some things, but this was the first time we were so much a participant in witnessing what was happening. And my dad and a number of other pastors were a part of the exercise of these spirits. It never has left me as far as one of the experiences I've had. And I do believe some people will say negative energy. Some people will say bad spirits and juju, and a number of different ways they call it. But I do remember that has stayed with me as far as the spirit. When you encounter someone, and sometimes you have this nagging feeling that, you know what, I'm not quite certain about this person, that stayed with me. And to me, that is God giving us this spiritual awareness of, it's not just us. We're not just these skin human beings, and that there's so much more to us as whole beings. So seeing him climb up the wall backwards, I mean, literally like in the movies, I remember seeing, and it stayed with me to this day. And I can attest there was a number of people seeing it. So that would be one of the first stories that was really graphically different of my own experience. And I've shared this story a couple of times in some scary stories that I've talked with the young people I worked with and giving them campfire stories. But true story, very true story. And my dad was a big part of that. He was on an interfaith council as well, with different ministers, Catholic faith and Methodist faith and Lutheran faith. And they would discuss some of the spiritual nature of people and how man communicates with other spirits. So it had been a part of my growing up. So it was, I had experienced a number of those things in watching my dad converse about the spiritual nature of man. So yeah, it was very different, brother. Very different.
This is such a good conversation pre-Halloween. If you guys are listening,
I know. Oh, yes.
The DOD, it's the week before Halloween. If you're listening to this some other time, so this is a very appropriate conversation.
It is Halloween coming up. It absolutely is. So Paul, it is. So Paul, we got to scare the people before Halloween and get them ready with these kind of stories. So Paul, tell me, when writing, or no, you're not a writer on this show, correct?
No, podcast. And actually, I'll go back to what you asked, like, how did this all happen? Because I think this is a good story for to get back to TV film stuff for anyone who's aspiring to do this. So it's actually very funny. 2 years ago, me, my buddy Ryan, who's a producer, and my buddy Phil, who's a writer, and he actually works at Warner Brothers as in the marketing department. My buddy Ryan wanted to get together like a writers group, like once a week or something, and get together and come up with ideas, or pitch our own ideas and see like what people thought of them. And at that writers group, Ryan had this idea for a show about exorcists. And at the time, I was very skeptical because what I had done is I actually had pitched a reality show about exorcists, right? And so here's the part that for anyone who's interested in unscripted, you should really pay attention to, because this is what all the big studios will say to you. They want two things. They want one, they'll ask you, why now? Like, why should we do this now? And the second thing is they want some kind of exclusive access. Like it's an exclusive look, like something other people can't get. So if you're trying to pitch an unscripted show, think of this right now. You need really exclusive access to footage or people, right? Celebrities, people. And it needs to be, why does this need to be told now? All the big studios, if you're unscripted, will ask this for you. And at the time, the problem is that there's no videos of exorcisms. And when they happen, no one's allowing people to shoot this on video, right? And I was just very skeptical because I'm like, I pitched a show like this. People like the idea, but how are we going to get the footage? There's nothing available. And like, this won't happen. So it just sat for like a year. And then what happened later is Ryan somehow met Father Martins, and he created this audio podcast as a recreation, something like, the analogy he used is like America's Most Wanted, where they talk about it and then they reenact it. And because these are all reenactments, it allows you to, and because it's not videotaped, because it could look, let's be honest, it could look really cheesy to videotape some demonic possessions, depending on what it was. It's just, it could go off the wrong end. But being a podcast, an audio drama, it really lends itself well because you don't need that footage. You just recreate that footage and it's audio. You don't have to worry whether something looks dumb or not. And he did it. And so that's where that came from. It came from an idea someone had for a TV show, which would never have worked as a TV show. And then he came up to something where it was able to change genres. So I want you guys are doing stuff at home. Like if you have an idea for an unscripted show, you're like, oh, we should do an unscripted show about the Iditarod dog sled race in Alaska. Well, that's great. But do you personally have access to those people? Like, do you have footage you can take?
Great point.
Because if you don't, it's not going to work. So and that's the difficulty if you're somebody who's a producer and unscripted, is that you don't just have to have a great idea. You actually personally have to have access to those people that no one else has, that you can create that idea. So that's the other thing you really have to think about if you're actually trying to produce a show and unscripted.
And so once he pitched it to him, what got you interested in the project?
I knew he was doing it. I was super excited for him. And because it's VOs, he just went to friends he knows who are actors. And he said, hey, do you want to audition for this? It's like, sure, I'll audition for this. And so I auditioned just like everybody else, and he didn't even make the final choice. He was partnering with iHeartRadio at the time. His producing partner made the final choice, and I was the one that was chosen. So I legitimately earned that position. It wasn't nepotism. Well, the audition was nepotism, but but the actual being cast was not nepotism. I actually had to earn that.
I'm curious. So in playing Father Martins, what do you feel you're learning about maybe, not only him, but the spiritual realm? Do you feel like there's, especially being in season 2, things that you're learning that you haven't learned before?
Yeah, great question, Guru. So, in the movies, when I actually did my reads, I did like I saw in the movies. It was like, and it was like this is yelling, in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost, I cast thee out, right?
Yes.
And I don't know if it's I don't know if it's just Father Martin's temperament, because he's very boring. If you're listening, Father Martin, if you're listening to this, I'm saying it with love.
I was just going to say, if he's listening, that might have.
What I mean by boring is that he's very phlegmatic. He's very just even keeled, right? And that also caused a little bit of an issue in me playing him, because his lilt, I listened to a lot of tape of his lilt is very boring. And so I had to, and again, Father Martin said, I don't mean boring, I mean it's even keeled. And so it had to be trying to do him, but elevated a little bit, so it was a little bit more interesting and a little bit more, it was a little more sauce to it. One thing, but so it might just be his temperament, but he always said he doesn't raise his voice. He scolds the demon. He's like, nope, like, tell me your name, demon, tell me your name, what is your name? And again, that sounds very boring to hear that over and over, but he comes from this point of view that the demon does not have power, it's God. And so when he's talking to the demon, it's almost like a schoolmaster talking to a child, and he doesn't raise his voice, he doesn't get crazy. He's just, he actually says, I just scold the demon, I scold it. That was very interesting, and also sort of revelatory spiritually. You're just like, well, that's actually pretty true.
Absolutely. So you're learning that is part of what you're learning is that you have authority, or people have authority, or was that more particular? Dig it.
I think it's a good way to say it.
Dig it. And then I'm curious, some of your friends or some of the colleagues who are on this program, have any of you experienced some extracurricular phenomenon during the time you guys have been filming this? Recording? Just that curious question. And if it's too scary and if it's too private, that's okay.
No, but I did have some so for instance, like during recording, like my car was broken into, they broke out my window, stole all my stuff, thousands of dollars worth of damage. And so people were saying like, well, it sounds like spiritual warfare, I didn't necessarily have any personal, like specific demonic encounters, but there were weird things like that, that kind of came out of the blue. Maybe it was spiritual warfare. I don't want to attribute to malice where other just coincidence is involved. But Ryan, the producer, said that, other people had experienced sort of maybe difficulties, like difficult things occur, and they felt like maybe it was a bit of a spiritual pushback.
Oh, dig it. Oh, yeah. Wow. That's pretty heavy duty. Now, I'm curious, as an actor, where did you draw from?
I mean, listening to hours of tape of Father Martin's. And that's where it's difficult, is because when you're playing someone who's alive and real, you have to really try to be as authentic to that character as possible. So I think in those situations, it's sometimes more difficult than other stuff, because you have to try to match somebody else, right? You don't have a lot of leeway. You're trying to be someone else. So in those particular cases, yes. And also I think that for any of you guys who are actors out there, so I'm assuming that we have actors in the audience.
We do.
So VO is voiceover. It can be a lazy person's acting, because you don't have to memorize any lines, you're literally reading off a page. And what I'd recommend to anyone over there who's ever gets to do VOs is to, sometimes people get lazy and it sounds like they're reading, right? So when I prepared and I went through all my script like I normally would. I underlined words that were important, like which word do I punch? What's important? What is this person saying in the scene? You try to use your full instrument of your voice, whether it's your dynamics of your voice, the tempo of your voice to speed up and slow down, or to pause at the right time. It's much easier, obviously, because there's no video camera on you. You can come in sweats and, doesn't matter how you look. But it's no reason to be lazy. So I would just say, if any of you guys get a chance to do VO, take it very seriously, come in prepared. Don't just walk in and just read it, because it's obvious when people just read it. And if you're not preparing as an actor now, going on to video sets, then you're doing something wrong, because you should absolutely show up prepared. I think me as a director, when I'm directing people, having someone unprepared and not knowing their lines is the most frustrating, annoying thing. And I would never cast that person again, because I literally think to myself, like, this is your one job. Your one job is to be an actor. You should know your lines. Why don't you know your lines? And if you don't know your lines, how are you going to act this role when you don't even know what your lines are? So I think a lot of people don't want to be actors. I think a lot of people want to be stars, which is a completely different thing.
Very, very well point. A very good point.
Because
elaborate.
If you actually want to be an actor, that means you love acting, which means that, are you reading a play? Like, I have a friend of mine who's like, oh, I love acting. I was like, okay, cool. What play are you reading? Oh, you're not reading any plays? Why not? Don't you love acting? Don't you want to read the greats of acting? How about you get together with a few of your friends who like actors and read through Pinter or Mamet or Peter Schaffer or, you know, Arthur Miller? Why aren't you doing that? If you aren't doing those things, I don't really think you like acting. You know, do you really like it? Because the things you like, you will do for free and you'll do all the time because you actually love doing it. If you only act, if you get cast in something, you don't love acting. Acting isn't your love. You just like being in front of a camera and getting attention. Because if you loved it, you would be doing it. And so this is my challenge to you. If you really think you're an actor out there, I'm not saying you're not. What have you sacrificed for it? What does it cost you financially, physically, emotionally?
Great points.
You know, and are you doing it on a daily or weekly basis or even a daily basis? Are you reading through great scripts and great roles? Are you trying to get yourself better? Because I went to the conservatory system. Like, I went and I have a degree in music, right, in a conservatory. And the great thing about conservatory, it's 4 years of only studying your instrument. And the thing is also is that, Guru, are you familiar with the jury system in conservatories, juries, what juries are?
I can't say I am. I can't say I am. I'd be very interested for you to elaborate.
So at the end of every semester in conservatory, every person takes a jury. It's called a jury. And what it is, you perform whatever your instrument is, singing, bassoon, violin. You actually perform a couple songs in front of the entire music department, right? Not only that, they may have you do some sight reading, you know, a few other things. And if you fail your juries, you're out of the department. And so, yeah, every semester you could be gone. And by the way, the thing is like, everyone's like, oh, I'm in acting school. Like, I'm taking acting classes. I'm like, you pay your money, everyone's going to take you. Like, it doesn't matter where you're spending money and you're acting like it's a big deal that you're in this acting class. Well, you just paid to be in it, right? The thing is like, they weren't selective. They didn't turn everyone away. They took everyone in because they're trying to make money. Conservatories are different. They do take your money, but they turn away 100 people for every one person auditions, right? They only have so much space to get into Berklee College of Music, to get into, you know, NYU, right? You know how many people get turned down and turned away from conservatories? And so the thing is for every one of you who fails, there's 100 people who are ready to take your place. And if you never get cast in anything, if you flunk out and fall by the wayside, nobody cares, right? That's your own fault because you are responsible for practicing your instrument, being good, getting better, because no one's holding your hand and nobody cares if you fail. That's the kind of world that is. And I wish more people would go through that world because then they would understand the amount of work ethic and personal responsibility and personal accountability you have to take. So, because if you right now are saying you're an actor, but you're not it hasn't cost you a thing, and you're not reading, I can give you a reading list to read, but you could find it yourself of the greats, you know, Chekhov. Why aren't you reading Chekhov? Arthur Miller, one of the greatest American playwright of our time. Why aren't you reading his stuff? You want to learn about subcontext in dialogue where someone says something, but there's layers of context under what they're saying. Arthur Miller is amazing, right? So why aren't you doing that? So the thing is that LA largely is full of people who want to be stars. They really don't want to be actors. When they say actor, they mean star, right? New York is full of more people who actually care about the craft because what you love, you will be doing all the time for free. We had somebody, I'm sorry, I'm ranting on this. I had somebody.
No, not at all. It's great. This is I think this is extremely useful for our audience and people who are interested. And this is our goal by creating the 1 million leaders.
So we had, so we're working on a new project with Ryan right now. It's called The Last Air Force One. It's an audio drama. And it's from the guys who did Black Rifle Coffee. This isn't Black Rifle Coffee, but this is coffee. They apparently sold a an independent book series which has sold 4 million copies, and they're making one called Homestead right now. It's either a series or a movie which is going to be released. And they went to Ryan and said, hey, will you do an audio drama of one of the other books? Because, they sort of tie together, TV, film, and then there's an audio drama, which kind of sort of relate in the same universe. And I remember, so we rewrote this pilot script for the audio drama, which we already shot. We already recorded. And there was this, Ryan, again, with nepotism, calls friends of his and say, hey, do you want to audition for this? And we had one lady he wanted to cast for a very small role. It was literally probably 15 minutes of recording time. It was probably like 6 lines, right? And she said, and by the way, with audio recordings, non-union, they pay very little because audio recordings make very little, right? So she was being paid a sum of money. I'm not going to say. I was going to say, I'm not going to say. She was being paid a sum of money, right? Very good. Like most people would make that amount. It'd be a day's worth of wages for a lot of people, right? More than a day's worth of wages. Even if you're in California, which is $20 an hour, it would be more than a day's worth of wages for somebody for 15 minutes worth of work. And it was too low for her. And she said no. She's like, no, I can't do it for that. And I had a fit with Ryan. And I was like, Ryan, no one's knocking down the door of these actors. No one's saying, boom, 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 boom. Will you please act in my show? And I was like, do you love acting or don't you? Do you love it or don't you? Because if you loved it, you would jump at the opportunity to do it for free. But you're being paid, a couple bills for 15 minutes worth of work, right? On a show that's going to be heard nationally, right? But oh no, you can't do it for that. And for me, that's just crazy talk. So for any of you guys out there, how much do you love it? Do you actually love it? I mean, is it something you really love? Because if you can't say to yourself now, like, hey, I'm willing to, so my friend, such a rant. So my buddy just decided like, hey, I want to be an actor. Hey, I just want to be an actor. He's been in finance his whole life. And I said, honestly to him, like, are you willing to put in 5 years of hard work until you get to the place you can be good enough to be an actor? He said yes. And I'm not sure. But I wanted to tell him, look, it's one of those things where if you play an instrument, it's sort of like somebody saying, oh, I want to be an actor. Tomorrow I'm going to be an actor. Or tomorrow I'm going to be a writer. I'm going to write something. That's like saying to somebody who is a musician to say like, hey, Guru, Guru, have you ever played piano? No. Okay, well, that's fine. And this year I'm going to play at Carnegie Hall. No. I mean, no, you have to be firstly talented, gifted, work your talent, and get to that place where you're super good at it, right? You don't just play Carnegie Hall. Same thing for dance. You don't dance with the Bolshoi 1 year after taking ballet for the first time. You need a decade's worth of dance training, right? But for some reason, people think they can be actors after a month or they're already an actor. So I'm saying to you guys, and anyone who's an aspiring actor out there, if you want to be any good, you have to put in the time, work, effort, sacrifice, bleed for it. Why aren't you doing it every day? Because if you're not doing it every day, if you're not reading plays every day, if you're not studying acting every day, I don't think you really love it. I just think you want to be a star. And that's completely different.
It brings me to this other point. So what do you think about parents who push their children into acting? Is it better that a young person 9 years old, 10 years old, 12 years old does not get into acting due to some of the rigorous training? Are you an advocate of child actors going through the system that kind of way, and that's some of the groundwork training? Or do you feel it's much better if you're an adult going into it knowing that you really want to be an actor, and or even if you're just going to want to be a star?
Yeah, I mean, that's a slippery slope. I mean, the thing is, I don't think parents should force a kid to do something they don't want, because for a lot of parents, that's them living out their dream through their child. If the child really legitimately loves it, then there's different. I mean, hopefully, if you guys want to be actors out there, what I'm about to say makes sense to you. If it doesn't, you need to do some research, because I was going to say you shouldn't be doing Lee Strasberg method, right? You should be doing something more Sandy Meisner, because Strasberg, which is incredibly method, is very damaging psychologically to people, and you don't want to do that to a child. So Meisner has to do with masks and replacing masks that you wear. And again, if you're a wannabe actor out there, wannabe aspiring actor out there, and you don't know what I'm talking about, then you really need to get in your books and start reading Uta Hagen, Sandy Meisner, all these people, so you understand exactly what I'm saying when I'm talking to you about the craft of acting. So
I'm glad you gave out some of those book names too. Some of those book titles, I think, instrumental for people to check out in order to get their footing.
A great example of a star is Josh Brolin. So Josh Brolin comes from, James Brolin. He had all the nepotism and he did a lot of stuff. And I don't know if he's any good or not. I don't remember his old stuff. But Josh Brolin literally said, he goes, "I'm not a good actor." He took 2 years off and he went to New York just to study in conservatory. And he came back, and now, like, he's much older and wizened and stuff like that. But that guy is so good. You can tell
he's
the
phenomenal.
difference.
Oh, he's one of my favorites. He's one of my favorites. I think that his methodology, and all the roles from Old Boy is one of my favorite movies he's ever done. But I can list a number of them. No Country for Old Men. He's just, he's just phenomenal. And I see what you mean with that. Now I'm curious. Okay, so in acting, you're also a writer and you're also a director. Now, which one, if you have one, is your favorite place to be? Who was Paul Leach? More a writer, more a director, more an actor? Or if you find some happy balance between that, what would you say?
Probably, if I had to choose one, it'd probably be directing. And there's a reason, is because directing encompasses everything. Because you are reading a script and you're trying to elicit a performance out of somebody, right? And so you're sitting down with them and you're working on the acting with that person, right? And with the script, sometimes you have to rewrite a script. So I look at directing the same way as I look at conducting. So I took conducting classes in conservatory. And before they allowed us to take conducting classes, we had to take what were called method classes. I hope this is interesting to you guys out there.
It is, I'm sure.
So we had to take what was called methods classes, which means I had to literally play every instrument in the orchestra. Every single instrument I had to play. I had to learn how to play. And believe me, they were terrible. We spent like a month on every instrument, and we would play the stuff in class, like sight read stuff in class. And that class sounded like dogs howling, right? Because everything sounded bad. But the point wasn't that we were good. The point is that as doing conducting, you have to know every single instrument, right? I have to know my ranges for my bassoon. I have to know what staff that bassoon is played. Is it a F staff? Is it a C staff? What clef is it being played on, right? Is it a B flat instrument? Is it an E flat instrument? Is it a C instrument? What is the range? When I play a saxophone, when does it hit the next register? When doesn't it? What are my fingerings? What are my articulations is really big, because with violin, you have all these articulations. There's a little V that's marked on your staff, which means that it's an upstroke. When you see a V, that's an upstroke. And there's a little square, which is called a frog, which is a downstroke. And you're like, well, who cares? Well, the thing is the downstroke is stronger than the upstroke. It's like, because you have gravity and this pressure. So if you're actually writing violin, which I love writing for violin, if you want these real powerful, like double stops, if you're like, da, 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 that would all be downstrokes. It wouldn't be da, 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 da. It wouldn't be downstroke, upstroke, downstroke, upstroke. It would be frog, 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 frog. See what I'm saying? All the articulations plus the runs, like you hear the articulations and you're like, what the crap am I doing? What am I trying to say? When am I doing my runs? The bowing is such a big deal. Like, when do I do my bowing? And I would have no idea about any of that stuff unless I was forced to play that instrument. And so guess what? Now when I'm conducting and I'm bringing people in and I know exactly, I'm like, oh, I got to bring them on the down bow, like bam, bam, because I understand how every single instrument works, right? And so that's what conducting is. And then directing should be the same way. Should. And what I mean is that you should know your lenses, you should know your frame rates, you should know all the technicalities of your tools that you're using. Let me give you an example to make this very obvious to you guys. So for instance, I'm assuming a lot of you guys saw The Revenant with Leonardo DiCaprio and Tom Hardy. Did you see
Great
The Revenant?
movie. Great. Oh yes, great
Phenomenal movie, phenomenal director, Inrutu. When I watched that movie, something always bugged me about that movie. Didn't bug me, stood out to me about that movie. Not in a bad way, but in a way. And what that was is I could tell by watching the movie that the camera was too close to their faces the whole time. It was, and the reason is because when you have a camera lens, the camera has a curvature of glass, right? And so the closer you get to someone's face, like their face distorts. Their face begins to distort.
Wow. Yes,
Their
yes,
face
yes.
distorts, right? And so what happens then is the whole time Leo's nose looked huge, Tom Hardy's nose looked huge. There was this slight deforming distortion that was very obvious. And I thought to myself, I'm just like, the camera is way too close. So they must have used a 10 to 20 lens, probably a 13 to 15 lens. It was probably handheld. It was probably this far away from their face. And so when I watched the making of, it's exactly what it was. It was a handheld. It was in a mirror and was this far away from their face. Now, why is that important, guys? You're like, okay, big deal. It's important because you have to understand the lenses and your cameras, because first of all, you normally don't want distortion on somebody's face, right? This is why Michael Bay gets made fun of a lot, because he uses these really long lenses from far away, right? But he does that for a reason. It's because it's a beauty shot. When you have these really long lenses, you're zooming in from across the street. It's this beautiful tableau. It's a beauty shot, right? So then when would you want to have distortion on someone's face? Well, how about when they suddenly get possessed by a demon, like we talked about?
Oh, yeah. Yes.
I switch my lens to a 50 or less, and then I would push it close to their face to have that slight distortion on their face from the curvature of the glass, right? Because I'm telling the audience through the distortion that something's wrong, right? But if you don't know your lenses, you would never even think about these things, because no one magically does something. So the thing is this is what I was telling people about, like whether it's music, like if you study music, if you know music theory, you can do modal scales, a string of secondary dominants. You can do a Picardy third at the end of something. People don't naturally do that stuff because they don't even know that stuff exists. You have to hear this stuff to realize, oh, well, this is what a Picardy third sounds like. Instead of ending on a major, like a minor key and a minor chord, minor one in a minor chord, I end on a major one. You would never hear that normally. But when you study music, it's like colors on your palette, right? You wouldn't know this otherwise. And this is what I tell people, whether it's directing, acting, music, or even writing. You don't naturally, magically write great structure in your scripts. You would never, ever would you just naturally write a perfectly structured script, because you don't know what a perfectly structured script is, right? You don't know about how to create tension through all these different areas and stuff. Like, you don't know how to do that. This is why you need to be educated, whether you want to be an actor, a writer, a director. Again, I use the conservatory model, and I'm very different than most people because I'm big on education because I went through education. And this is why I think, my stuff is what it is compared to other people's stuff, because the sheer knowledge of understanding how to use certain things, right? Again, like that curvature of the glass thing, you would have never known that, right?
Nope, I would.
And
never.
so, but then it gives you a reason to use that because you understand the technicality of your instrument. I really believe, like, one thing, if you guys are Christian out there, one thing I believe that really God spoke to me is he was telling me that, like, if you want to change the world, you need to create like God creates. And when God creates, it's the perfect technicality of beauty and technicality. It's perfect technicality, confluence of art and technicality. So if you look at a tree, it works technically perfect, right? Its leaves go wide. It catches as much rays of the sun as possible. Its roots go deep to keep the topsoil on the earth there. By the way, if plants didn't have roots, the topsoil would all blow away. It actually keeps the soil on the earth in place, right? Photosynthesis, the oxygen cycle, all that good stuff, scientifically perfect. But Wordsworth wrote poems about trees because they're so beautiful, right? And if you want to change the world, create like God creates, which is technical and creative. Technical and creative. Ridley Scott, technical and creative. Albert Einstein, his ideas were freaking abstract, technical and creative, right? Leonardo da Vinci, technical and creative. Steve Jobs, technical and creative. The problem is, I think for most artists, is that they're lazy. And you just are like, oh, I'm a creative person. Guess what? Everyone thinks they're creative. Every single person thinks they're creative. Oh, I have an idea. Every single person has an idea. In LA, you go to Starbucks, filled with people without jobs. And you throw a rock at any one of those people, that person has a dream and a big idea. None of that matters. What, right? So the thing is, you have to be able to, being an idea person, I think means you're lazy because you don't have the work ethic to get your idea done. You have to
get your idea into action is what I'm
get your
understanding.
idea into action. You need to put work into it. Work is very, very necessary. It's even a biblical principle. God does not reward people who sit around and just wait. I told my friend, I was like, look, if the ball is rolling, God can redirect a rolling ball, right? Just get the ball rolling and God can redirect it.
I like that.
If the ball is sitting there, God can't redirect it. It's just sitting there. God pointing a different direction makes no difference. The ball isn't even moving, right?
You need some motion.
It needs some motion. So guys, every one of you who's aspiring out there, listen to me really closely. And look, who am I? Probably nothing to you. But the thing is I want to encourage you. One, do you want to be an artist or are you looking to be a star? You have to be honest with yourself. Because if you're looking to be a star, you're probably not doing any hard work to become a good artist, right? Be honest with yourself. Do you really care about the art? Does the art really matter to you? Because people in New York have suffered and died and lived and died in obscurity and who are amazing artists and they loved it and they lived for the art. Do you love the art?
I think that in talking about that, because I think that was incredible advice. And once upon a time, there was this little boy named Seth Guru who thought about acting and found I did not have necessarily that wasn't going to be my vocation. But all the applications you said, I think are extremely helpful and advisable for someone who's looking to get into it, which brings me to my next point. You and this movie. Now, this movie that you have written, and please forgive me, Paul, did you also direct it or you wrote it?
I did not direct this one. This one was just written by me.
And so it's 1 million followers. How appropriate of a title for today's times. Paul, please tell us about this movie.
Guys, this movie is, I wanted to talk about how social media is like a drug and how we get these dopamine hits from social media. It's literally like a drug. You get these dopamine hits from all your likes, comments, feeling acknowledged, which also says something about our society. We're so little.
It really does.
Right?
It really does.
That we look for acknowledgement in the wrong places, right? So just like somebody who is addicted to meth or something, like, I'm sorry, this hopefully is, I don't know if it's a PG rated show, but someone who like...
It's a grown-up show. Okay. We try to appeal to everyone, but it's a grown-up show.
So maybe it's someone who's addicted to drugs and they end up prostituting themselves out. Not because they like prostituting themselves out, it's because they need more drugs, right? And the same thing is really true with their social media. Like you have all these girls, and look, I'm a guy, I like girls, but you have all these girls who, in order to increase their likes, they do sexier and sexier photos because that gets the most engagement, that gets the most attention, that gets the most dopamine hit. What are you willing to do to keep the dopamine hit going once you start getting a little? What are you willing to compromise? And that really is about that. It's about like this really conservative girl grows up in the Midwest, gets a little internet fame. And once she starts getting the internet fame, she starts going down, starts compromising and compromising and compromising and compromising. What are you willing to compromise? Also adding in the idea of human trafficking. This all takes place in Thailand, by the way. Like all these influencers get invited to Thailand and then some start disappearing. It's actually a thriller. But at its heart, so what I just told you is actually the beating morality and the beating heart of the show, the movie.
Yes.
But the idea behind it is I really want to talk about how social media is like a drug, and what are you willing to compromise to get the affirmation from complete strangers? The biggest part about the movie, the denouement, the real turn point, which unfortunately in the edit, And by the way, if you're an aspiring writer out there, your movie never ends up the way you wrote it. Just unfortunately, that's just the way it happens.
I'm glad you included that. I don't think most people know that.
Never ends up the way you wrote it. In fact, it's usually very, very different than the way you wrote it, because you have a director who changes what they want, and then you have an editor who doesn't know who you are at all. Somebody in the editing bay who edits the movie together the way they want, having zero connection to you or your intent of the movie whatsoever. So the director might be connected to you a little bit. Either they might be your friend, or they've spoken to you about what you intended to do or what you meant to say. But 100% the editor doesn't know who you are, and they're just chopping something together with zero idea of your intent or your story behind it. So that is one of the reasons there's complete disconnect between the editor at that point and the writer in terms of what it's meant. And so this one stayed pretty close to my script, which is pretty great. But the most important part of the script was really shot over. And if you get a chance to see it, it's like the Act 2, Act 3 turn, which is where Carissa, is it Carissa or Chrissy? Chrissy, the main character, she's been taking sexier and sexier pictures of herself, getting just down this downward spiral. Like, there's a really funny moment earlier on when she's in this house of influencers, and the lady's like, okay, guys, before you eat, you know what we all do. She puts her hands to pray, and everyone else pulls out their phone to take a picture of their food, right?
Oh, wow. Right. That says everything.
Hilarious, right?
Yes, yes.
But then she starts doing that, and that part is also missed, because there's supposed to be a lot of setup and payoff where they're like, okay, you know, now she's taking pictures of food, she's not even praying anymore. And there's this place where she's taking these really sexy photos of herself. Probably not sexy enough. I really wanted them to be really sexy in the movie just to really prove a point. And the real denouement, the turn point, is when she sees her little sister like her photo, like her racy picture. And she's like, oh no, she's like, what am I doing? Like, my little sister is looking at my stuff, right? And this is where she starts making the journey back. And that's sort of just glazed over super quick. It happens so fast. So that poignant moment.
It's a big point.
Yeah. So if you see that movie, that poignant moment is lost. But hopefully on the outside, it's entertaining, because that's what we want to do, is we want to entertain, right? Have it be commercially viable, but also say something important. Yeah, please support it and check it out. 1 million followers.
1 million followers is the title of the movie, written by Paul Leach. Paul, where it's being released tomorrow? Am I mistaken?
Yeah.
October
so guys,
25th?
Yep, it's October 25th. It's in theaters and maybe streaming. I actually have not checked which theaters it's in yet. I haven't gotten a chance. I probably, because I have a screener, so I can just watch it. But
for
definitely
those of
look
us
online.
who don't have a screener. For those of us who don't have a screener.
So definitely look online, guys. 1 million. The one is the numeral 1 million followers, not the spelled out 1 million followers. The trailer is pretty great. They did a great job on the trailer. Yeah, please check that out.
The trailer is being played on YouTube, if I'm not mistaken, but I also saw the trailer on a few other places.
Oh.
So can you list any of those places where they can see the trailer? I know YouTube. Where else?
Oh, I don't know where else. But YouTube, it's being distributed by Voltage Pictures. Voltage, they did all the Jason Statham movies. They're a really cool distribution company. They do a lot of action movies, a really legit, pretty big distribution company. So it's actually on the Voltage Pictures YouTube page. But if you just look for a 1 million followers movie on YouTube, you can find it. So yeah. It
looks, when I saw the trailer, it gave me vibes of M. Night Shyamalan's Old. With some of the film, and the only reason I say this is because some of the way I saw the filming of it, I guess you would say the cinematography of it, is some of that vibe, but definitely current when I saw some of the thriller nature of it. So it looks extremely exciting, and I'd be very fascinated, particularly since it's current times, as far as our confidence comes from, not ours, just yours and mine, but a number of our young people, I see the confidence comes from being liked by social media, which I find very concerning. And I think films like this help to point out some of those issues. And I think that needs to be looked at. But 1 million followers is the title of the movie, Voltage Pictures. Yes. And Paul has written it, and not only written it, but not only this project, but you've done other projects as well. Did you want to give a little insight to some of your other projects that you worked on, Paul?
There's 4 or 5 other movies. I would not go watch them for the reasons I just said. For the reasons I just mentioned. I watch them. I'm like, they screwed that up. So no, I would not do that. Oh, I do have to say, Guru, I do kind of have a hard out in a couple minutes. So
dig it. Absolutely, absolutely. Paul, if there was one word that makes you angry, what would that word be?
Angry.
Yes.
Oh shoot, angry.
Or you can even replace angry with frustrated. One word that makes you frustrated.
It's gonna sound terrible. I'd say incompetence or laziness. One of those two. Yeah.
That's good. That's good. And one word when you hear it that gives you a warm feeling.
Warm feeling. Wow. I would say effort. Effort in everything. Effort in your job, effort in your relationships, guys. It probably feels good when you like someone and they make an effort back, right? And that's the way God is for us, just so you know, to bring it back to him. Jesus made an effort for us. He didn't just, there's a great verse in the Bible that I think about a lot. It says that God demonstrated his love for us. And while we're still sinners, Christ died for us. So God just didn't say he loved us. There was a demonstration of love in the death of Jesus, in his life, right? It's not just saying love, there's a demonstration of love. And so I would say to you guys, even if you don't feel loved right now, demonstrate love to others. I think when you don't feel loved, try to love and demonstrate.
You know, Paul, we go back a while. You know, that's my language. It's demonstrate love.
Guys, Guru is one of the most loving, amazing people. I hope you get a chance to hang out with him in person sometime. Not in a stalkerish way, although he deserves stalkers.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Brother Paul, I can't tell you how much of a pleasure it's been to have you here with me. I want people to check out 1 million followers. I want them to actually, Paul, where can people find you to get more information about you, to connect with you? And as you know, in Makers Bar, we're looking to continue to build this community of people. So where can people reach you if they want to contact you to work on projects? Where can they find out more about projects you have coming up in the future? Where would those places be?
Yeah, guys, just hit me up on Instagram. You can look under my name, Paul Leach. It's right there, Leach. By the way, I'm under Paul Kim for 1 million followers. There's a reason I had to use that pseudonym. It's about a union thing versus non-union, but this is my name.
Glad you told us that.
Paul Leach. I'm adopted. Or you can, it's the / is Paul Soleil, like son in French, Soleil. But if you look under Paul Leach, I'll be the only Asian Paul Leach there is. So I should be close to the top. So yeah, hit me up on Instagram, shoot me a DM if you have any questions. Yeah, absolutely.
And for business purposes, is it a good idea to try and reach out to you on LinkedIn as well?
Sure. LinkedIn is also fine.
Fantastic. I want everyone to know this was a deep honor and pleasure. I've had the pleasure of knowing this cat for a good few years. And my heart has been good because some of you don't know, he is one of the most, he says about me, but he is one of the most encouraging men I know. He's one of the most wonderful, strongest men I know that has been consistent in his love of God and people and putting out the most positive kind of vibes. So Paul, it was absolutely a pleasure for you to be here with me today on Makers Bar. We are looking forward to all the projects you're going to do in the future and looking forward to interviewing you again. I must tell you how much I love you, brother, and how much I appreciate you being here with us today.
Such an honor, Guru. I really appreciate and love you too, guys. And guys, keep on listening to Guru. Keep on supporting his podcast. He does a great job.
I really thank you, brother. We are Makers Bar. I am your host, Seth Baxter. We are on fire, you guys. Makers Bar is growing faster than we have been imagined. So we would love for you, if you like this content, please press like, subscribe, and share. And remember, the Lovolution is the revolution, and it begins with you. Stand up, wake up, and believe in yourself, and know that you have a higher power that guides you all the time. One love, good people. God bless. Paul, thank you so much, my good brother. We are going to stay in contact and talk. Thank you, brother.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Absolutely.
Bye.